run of the mill. I went to university, I went to bar school. I had a year to kill before pupillage, so I worked in a local authority as a legal officer. And I've been a tenant for coming up to a year now. I love my job, so I really love opportunities like this because I know everyone's constantly hearing about legal aid being cut and how miserable the working hours are, and no one should ever go into the bar, especially criminal barristers. I really like my job, so at least hopefully within the next hour I'll be able to give you some encouragement to enter the bar, because there are some really fantastic elements of this profession which I'd love for other people to know about.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Madeline, would you like to go next?
I would. I'm not sure how much more I can add because me and Malvika do exactly the same thing, except that I work in London and she works in Birmingham. I'm also a family specialist. I work at 14 Grayson Square, which is a specialist family set. I do exactly the same work as Malvika. And I have exactly the same path to the bar. So I went to university, went to bar school. I didn't take a year. I went straight from bar school into pupillage. So I was 23 when I started pupillage. And I've been a tenant for 2 years now. So I finished my pupillage in 2018. And yeah, now I live and work in London. And I also love my job. But I think Malvika has it better than me because she sensibly chose to leave London.
Brilliant, thank you. And last but not least, Zeenat, would you love to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. My name's Zeenat. I am a barrister at 25 Bedford Row in London. I trained in criminal defence, but for the last 3 and a bit years have been exclusively working on the Grenfell Tower inquiry. Other than that, I probably the oldest here in that I completed my pupillage in 2015. So I was called in 2013. So it was actually just, well, I think it's most people's call anniversary, whoever was called in October. So I was called 7 years ago, been in practice since 2013, and maybe a little more jaded compared to the other two speakers in that there are aspects of this job that I love, and there are aspects that incredibly frustrate me. So I'm here to share whatever I can from those experiences. And I'm also a Brummie, so I'm kind of happy to be virtually back to the hometown.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We're glad to have you. I'm obviously not a natural Brummie, but I'm in Birmingham now, so we're so glad to have you. To take you all back to whenever it was that you went to law school, I think it's so interesting because a lot of our members and the people who view this are in university now, and obviously first or second year mostly. So I think they'd love to know when you were interested in law. Was it always that you were interested in law? And how did you first get into it? Malvika, we'll go with you. We'll do a little running order.
Sure. I decided to do a law degree not for any kind of good reason. I wanted to do something like English literature or history, but my parents are very Indian and they didn't approve, and they wanted me to do something like maths, which I didn't want to do. So we landed on law as a happy medium. So that really wasn't a good reason to do law. Thankfully, I loved my degree, and I would definitely recommend. It's a question. Like if Maddie and I have run sessions before becoming a family barrister, and a question that we often get asked is, should you do a law degree or a non-law degree? And I think that if you like the academic study of law, a law degree where you have 3 years to fully explore the subject in all its glory, rather than doing the GDL, which is cramming everything that you can possibly cram into 1 year just to get you past the threshold that you need to get to so you can become a lawyer. I definitely recommend doing a law degree, but if you just want to get to the end point of becoming a lawyer and you want to do something else, and you want to do something that's far more interesting than law, like English literature or history, then go for it. I don't think it really prejudices you either way. That's the reason why I did a law degree. And then while I was at university, I had a fantastic family law tutor. I really loved that as a module. I did vacation schemes, didn't really take to them, didn't really take to the area of law that all my peers were going into, which is mainly commercial law at city firms. And I did a lot of mini pupillages. And I thought, yeah, actually, this looks great. It's almost like being paid to be nosy, because you just get this really privileged insight into people's lives in a way that very few other people would. And I thought, yeah, I could do that. So that's the reason why I decided to go into family law.
Brilliant, thank you. I think I feel the same with wanting to do sort of family rather than, or just not anything commercial, I think is my path at the moment. Madeline, you had obviously fairly similar in family law interests, but were you always interested in law, or?
Yeah. I feel like I'm just going to be repeating everything that Marvika says. Sorry. I actually did want to do a law degree, and I was in battle with my parents against doing a law degree, actually. So they didn't want me to do a law degree because they wanted me to kind of get a more well-rounded university experience, but I wanted to do law. I went to the University of Cambridge, and I was told by my school that I wouldn't get into Cambridge if I applied for law because it was harder to get in, etc., etc. So after I navigated that, I was doing law and never did any vacation schemes, never entertained the idea of being a solicitor. It was not ever something that I wanted to do. I went into law school because I wanted to be a barrister, and if I couldn't have been a barrister, I would have done something completely different. And very similar to Malvika, I had a family law tutor who I loved and who is fantastic. He did a huge amount of international children work, a huge amount of kind of cross-border disputes, which I found really, really interesting. And he was kind of the person who talked me into applying to the family bar. But I think as a broader range of areas, like you say, you're not interested in kind of corporate commercial. I think people fail to understand the immense differences that there are in practice areas of law. So you can do anything from tax and commercial litigation and very sort of complicated accountancy type work, all the way through to the criminal defence work, which is, you know, we all know from television day in and day out, Mag's Court, wig on, defending someone who's hit a child with a car. And so you can do all the entire spectrum. And I think the main difference that I noticed in those spectrums were whether you wanted to work with people or whether you wanted to work with corporations and organisations. And completely a matter for you which one you prefer. But if you're interested in people and you want to talk to real people about their lives, then things like public law, criminal law, employment law, family law are much more people focused. It's jobs, it's lifestyles, it's families, it's, you know, interactions with employers, things like that. Whereas something like chancery or tax or commercial litigation, corporate litigation, is much more companies and how they interact and how contracts are written and how business is run. And I think it's really important to make that distinction early when you're applying for pupillage or before then, so that you can get an idea of what type of law you want to do. Because being a commercial barrister is an entirely different job to what me and Malvika do, which is court-based, and we meet different people every day and meet, you know, vulnerable people and people with mental health problems and people who aren't being supported in the right ways. And that is very different to working for, you know, Barclays or Tesco's or these corporations with huge amounts of money who are aware of their own commercial power. So I think at the stage that you're in law school, it's important to take a wide range of modules, learn what you're good at. I was terrible at tort law. I was absolutely horrendous at tort law. And I remember thinking, if I never see, you know, the tort cases again, I'll be happy. As long as I can do something that has nothing to do with tort law, then that's fine. And so I just went completely in the opposite direction. And so I think it's really important, if you're at law school or doing the GDL, to take as a wide range of areas as possible to know the difference. And also, I do kind of think with the GDL that it can be incredibly helpful in terms of, if you want, like Malvika said, if you want to just get the law degree done and out of the way and you have a passion of something else, that's great. But the diversity of courses is a lot smaller. So they don't actually teach family law on the GDL. They don't teach a huge amount of employment law or immigration or things like that. It's much more kind of, you're taught your contract, your constitutional, and then you're done. So if you are interested in smaller, more niche areas of law, then a GDL may not necessarily give you the grounding that you would need to pursue an area in that law. But having said that, loads of family barristers did the GDL and are very, very good. So it really doesn't make a difference. It just means that you might have to work a little bit harder in your chosen area to find the kind of requisite background to that. But yeah, I'm a law purist. I believe in doing law degrees, but that's because I did one.
And enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much. And Zina, when did the law interest start for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've wanted to be a barrister for as long as I can remember, and when I didn't even know what a barrister was. So I think for me, it started very early on. Like my year 10 work experience was in law, definitely knew in secondary school. And I think actually for me, that decision has always been motivated by my politics, I think. And for me, it's always been very social justice centred and activism centred. Absolutely always knew I was never going to go down the solicitor route, the corporate route, the commercial route. And in that sense, by the time I got to Warwick, which is where I did my undergraduate, everybody was going on about silver circle, magic circle, gold circle, whatever all the circles are. I don't know how many there are these days, whether they're still the same or whether there's new ones. And then there was kind of just like me sitting in my own little silo being like, absolutely can't think of anything worse personally that I'd rather be doing with my life. And so in that sense, had to kind of carve my own way out, because I know that things are beginning to change now. Like this stuff's really great. But in my day, there was literally no exposure to careers at the bar at all. I always knew that I wanted to do things like human rights. All my modules were around subjects like that, immigration law, human rights in practice and stuff like that. And then after Warwick, I then went on to do a master's in public international law and human rights. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's always been kind of centered in that, and all my stuff that I do outside of being a lawyer is all about that as well. So for me, being a lawyer is just actually one part of a bigger narrative. And I think the law can help with some of those wider aims, but actually there are limitations with being a lawyer too. In terms of areas, and this might be something that is useful for you all to know, I think if any of you are like me, I had big dreams of where you think you're going to end up in terms of an ideal set, an ideal chambers, somewhere where you might think is, wow, that's where I want to be. It's really great if you kind of end up somewhere where you think you want to be, but just a couple of points. Number one, pupillage is incredibly difficult to get, so you kind of get what you get. And when you're deciding where to apply to, obviously you'll apply to areas that are aligned with your interests, but you need to be prepared to end up somewhere that might not be squarely in your interests. And that's almost what happened with me. I have always been interested in crime, but it was never my plan to kind of start my career as a hardcore criminal defence barrister, although I realised that gave me a foundation in a way that I don't think anything else would have, such as surviving ridiculous situations. But I just think that it's really important, even if you end up somewhere that may not be where you think you want to be, it's really important to keep your fingers in all those other pies. So if you've got other interests, make sure that you're doing stuff outside of kind of chambers, if you like, in those areas. Because one good thing about being a barrister is being self-employed. Once you get taken on as a tenant, you can really carve your own practice, your own interest areas, and then become known for certain areas and niches. So I guess the takeaway from what I've said is, great to get somewhere where you think you really are going to fit. Even if you don't, it's absolutely fine. You can carve out your areas of interest in other ways. And I guess a secondary point is, sometimes we can think somewhere is going to be great for us, whereas actually it may not well be. And I know that in my experience, speaking quite candidly, there are a few sets that I thought were my absolute number one and number two, but when I interviewed there, I absolutely just felt the total opposite. And I've spoken to colleagues and friends that have had similar experiences where actually they just felt like they fit much better in other places. And that's something that you'll find as you meet barristers in different chambers, get a flavour of what sets are like. What people portray themselves as isn't always what they actually are. And those are lessons that I think sometimes come actually a lot later on, but it's important to be alive to that early on.
Yeah, that completely resonates with me, especially linking back to how you felt like you were alone in law school and everybody else wanted to have a different interest. I know especially for us, this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to do this career series, but also be part of the Women in Law Society, was that even now there's still so much of focus on the commercial law aspect. And I remember all the events I signed up to, especially because most of the people here are from University of Birmingham. When I signed up to all the law events, I thought, gosh, it's commercial tax, real estate, applications for this, applications for the law firms, how to develop commercial awareness. And that's brilliant. And I've learned quite a lot from the commercial awareness side as well. And I think it's important to keep in touch with the news and what's going on in that realm. But I completely agree that we need to keep doing this and keep opening the doors for people who want to do other aspects as well and focus on other practices. And even then, I developed an interest in property law actually once we did land law last year. So I think everybody's starting in uni as well now. Just completely listen to these amazing guests, because I think you're interested. You'll learn things that didn't even think you were interested in, and you'll be able to develop completely on what you are. And really, by the end of it, now I'm final year, I'm kind of set on what I want to do. So even at the start, if you haven't really got a clue, your optional modules come in third year, and I think it's really the same for most law universities, and you'll really be able to carve out your own path, as you said. It's so interesting to hear all of your perspectives. Enough about me, obviously, and it's not me, but in terms of like law extracurriculars, one of the questions we had last week was about how people who didn't really have much confidence, go about doing extracurriculars and what ones they should go for, and how important extracurriculars really are in law school. So I just wondered what any of you did in terms of extracurricular events, bearing in mind that a law degree is basically a full-time job. What did you do other side your law degree? Malvika?
Yeah, so I don't think you need to fall into the trap of only doing law-related extracurriculars. A lot like Zinat, I had a big part of the reason why I went into law was the social justice element. So a lot of my activities at university centered around that. I was in the Feminist Society. Most of my time was occupied with that. I was in the Literature Society. That's what I was really interested in. And so it's not necessarily the case that you have to make sure that you do mooting and that you do like the typical law-based activities and only that. Obviously, I think that you should do those things, but I think that that's almost a sort of bare minimum. But for other activities, I think do whatever you're interested in, because you'll be able to speak to it more passionately at interviews. So whenever I was at interview, I wouldn't be asked about the things that I thought I'd be asked about. I was asked about the fact that I was in the Kabaddi Club in my final year of university, which is like an Indian British bulldog. Like it's like it's a contact sport where I was the only girl on the team, and that was a good anecdote, and it was something that everyone wanted to talk to me about. And I could speak about it because I was interested in it. And I think you bring forward the best side of yourself if you're able to speak with passion about something that you're really interested in. In terms of family law specific extracurriculars that you might want to get involved in at university, I volunteered in a contact centre. I don't know what the issue, it's going to be a different landscape with COVID, but post-COVID, you can go on the National Association of Child Contact Centre website. You can look up if they need any volunteers for supported contact on a Saturday. You could sign up for that. That's a really interesting way to get a different insight into the family system. You can also join through the free representation unit, I think, from third year. Obviously, you're in Birmingham, but if you move to London or Nottingham for bar school, there are free representation units there. You can volunteer with the personal support unit, which is now called Support Through Court. I'm pretty sure there's one in Birmingham. So there are lots of different things you can do. If you go on the LawWorks website and you want to do something law specific, that's a good place to start. But yeah, do whatever you want to do at university. You're only there for 3 years. Don't just build up your CV with a view to getting a job at the end, because you'll look back and really regret all the things that you could have signed up for, but you didn't because you wanted to moot.
I completely agree. Madeline?
Yeah, I agree as well. I think mooting is really important, and actually I really enjoyed mooting, because the reason I wanted to be a barrister was because I loved advocacy, and that I thought was more my skill than the kind of contract side of it. So I did a lot of mooting because I liked it. But I think there was 2 things I did when I was at university which I feel were the most helpful, both for me going in straight into the bar and also for something to talk about when I was applying for pupillage. And the first was I did a year abroad. So I went to Spain for a year between my second and third year of university, which wasn't part of my degree. It was an Erasmus program that my university offered to the law school. And I took it, and so I lived in Madrid for about 9 months, which was one of the best things I've ever done. I hated it so much when I first started. I was so depressed. I used to fly home every 2 weeks. My boyfriend was in England. My parents were in England. My sister was in England. I was so upset. I thought it was the worst decision I'd ever made. I couldn't understand anyone. I was doing contract law lectures in Spanish. I was doing tort lectures in Spanish. It was the worst thing ever. And about 4 months in, basically I got home over the Christmas break and I said to my mum, I'm not going back. This isn't worth it. I want to be a lawyer in England. This is stupid. I'm not doing it. And my mum was like, yes, you are. Get on the plane. You're going back. And by the time sort of the 4th or 5th month, my Spanish was significantly better. I understood everyone a lot better. I was able to communicate, and I had to think about what I was saying. Before, I'd overly relied on my ability to communicate with people. And I was in a situation where I couldn't do that. And I had to learn how to communicate properly and say what I wanted to say and make jokes and try and bond with people in another language, which was massive insight into communication and how you speak to people. And by the end of it, my Spanish was fantastic. I picked up another language. I had loads of friends. I was living abroad. I was able to manage this mad idea that I had when I was 20, and it actually worked quite well for me, and I really enjoyed it. And on the back of that, I came back for the summer and I applied for a 3-month internship in Texas at a like appeals, basically as a law center for appeals for people who are on death row. So you work with attorneys in the US as an intern, and you help them with their appeals from death row, which I think is still something that happens. It's called amicus. I'm sure you've heard of it. And I did that in Houston, Texas for 3 months. And I can honestly say that I found Houston more strange than Madrid, because it is a mad, I mean, the county I was in is called Harris County, which is how they organize their kind of regions in America, a bit like constituencies. And that county kills more of its own people than Iran in a year. Huge amounts of executions, huge amounts of pregnant women, young people, 17, 18-year-olds, people with mental health problems. I met a man who had paranoid schizophrenia that was untreated for 12 years, who was about to be executed by the state. And that kind of thing, you can't really replicate. You just have to see it, and you have to know these people and understand how they work, and understand the system. And America is an extreme example. I mean, it's the worst justice system in the world, but it teaches you how to communicate and how to move through that system and how to learn how to navigate these boundaries that you don't agree with and think are horrendous, but you have to work within them. You have to do the best you can with the tools that you have. And so I think those two things for me, traveling is a massive thing I think that everyone should do. You have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to put yourself in situations that aren't comfortable, and meeting people that you would never meet, because I wasn't going to meet people with paranoid schizophrenia at the University of Cambridge doing a law degree, was I? So I think it was really helpful. And those two things for me were huge. And then following on from that, as you move through your law career, I don't think that you lose that interest. So I'm now massively interested in educational policy. I'm a governor at a school. I'm trying to do more work in special educational needs and things like that, because you see the impact that these things have on people when they're younger, when you do family law and when family breakdown and the impact that has on children. And you know that education is important. And so you want to take that interest that you initially had in people and things and not kind of lose it because it's what you do every day. And so I think it's really important to kind of keep a community aspect doing the job that we do, because it can be quite isolating, and being interested in the things that you went into law for the first place. I wanted to help kids and children, and that's what I want to do. And I can do that in a lot of ways outside of my job, which I find very fulfilling and which make me feel better when the work isn't so good. So I'd really recommend, don't lose that kind of spark of interest in what brought you to the bar in the first place, because it can really go a long way to maintaining your sanity as you carry on.
No, that's absolutely true. I think we can all learn from that as well, even if it's not, as you say, something that's completely law related. And it's a year abroad, there's so many transferable skills that you can take across and learn what your interests are and carry them through. I think that's so interesting. Thank you. Zina, any extracurriculars that you did during law school?
Yeah, I did a few. I guess, we've had quite a lot on this, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of points which come from my experience, which is sometimes, for me at least, it felt like there were lots of opportunities, and often they were international opportunities, but sometimes they weren't accessible to everybody. So I, for example, was given the opportunity to do an internship at the ICTY, but couldn't get the funding together in order to go, so I didn't go. And so one thing I just want to use this opportunity to highlight is, if other people feel like they might be in that boat, whether there are all these great opportunities, but for whatever reason you can't go, not to feel disheartened by that, because there are lots of other ways that you can build your skills personally and professionally, and also in law as well. And I think sometimes we have to be creative. So I still think till this day, the thing that got me pupillage at 25 Bedford Row was the fact that I set up a project whilst at uni, which was a youth project called Youth Inspire, and it came on the back of a module, a human rights module that I was doing. And I actually still run it till this day, 10 years or whatever on, 12 years on. But it started out as just something very small and in an area that I'm interested in. And when it came to my second round interview at 25 Bedford Row, they asked us to prepare a presentation on a non-legal topic. And I spoke about Youth Inspired because it's my baby. Mm-hmm. And I felt like because they were able to see my passion and my interest in that subject, it was that got me pupillage rather than having to do the plea mitigation or the bail application or whatever it was, because it just allowed me to really show what I was about in terms of both my values and passions and just what I had done. So I think if any of you have got your own ideas, it's also really great to show that you're innovative, you're creative, that you can create your own opportunities for yourself, because I know, having done stuff like this before, that sometimes people can feel like, you know, they might be applying for things but not getting places on them, and things like that. And the same goes for work experience and stuff. But there's something to be said about just thinking a little bit outside of the box and thinking, you know, what am I passionate about? What am I good at? And how can I create an opportunity out of this for myself?
Yeah, I completely agree. And that leads us quite nicely on then, because I wanted to kind of change the conversation into sort of more confidence and anxiety, because obviously during law school we're told that you need to apply for things, do work experience, do applications, and then make sure you've planned your career 5 years in advance. And I just wondered what all of your personal experiences were in terms of the confidence for applying for the BPTC course or the scholarships that you wanted to apply for, what confidence you had in terms of that, and how you managed it, and anxiety wise how you managed it around your legal studies. Malvik, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, for me, I was I wanted to be a barrister, but it wasn't the be-all end-all for me, and I actually think that helped a lot in terms of managing anxiety during pupillage applications, because I kept telling myself, like, if you don't get it, it's fine, you will get a great job somewhere else and you'd be an asset to that field. Zinat and I are in an Asian Women at the Bar WhatsApp group, and I think we were having this discussion the other day where I said this exact thing, and it does feel a lot sometimes for aspiring barristers that you wrap up your sense of self-worth in becoming a barrister, and that's obviously not something that I would advise at all, because it's very difficult to get pupillage. There's absolutely no guarantee that you will get pupillage, so I know it's difficult, but if you want to become a barrister, I think have a plan B, have a plan C, and keep telling yourself, you know what, this isn't the end of the world. It's a cool job, but there are lots of cool jobs, and you will do very well in some other field, I'm sure. There are lots of downsides to being a barrister, but in a sense, we kind of toot our own horns and we put ourselves on a pedestal so that people think, wow, I really want to be there. But we don't show you the horrible parts of the job. So I'd say try and separate your sense of self-worth from becoming a barrister. Don't feel like there is a ticking time, that you know that the time is ticking and that you need to make a decision quickly. One of the best things about going to the bar is that you can go to the bar at any time. My co-pupil, when I was doing pupillage, he, I think, had been doing his PhD in, I want to say, Irish history or something at Oxford several years before he came to the bar. I think one of the pupils that we've just taken on was a ballerina for several years before he came to the bar. So, you know, it's never too late to come to the bar. So if you feel like, actually, I'm not ready right now to make these applications, or I want to do something else with my life, go do it. The bar will be waiting for you. But don't feel the pressure just because everyone else is applying for pupillage, applying for vacation schemes, to feel like you have to apply right now. Because it is a very time-consuming process applying for pupillage, and I think you have to be in a really good place to do it. I'll leave Maddie to talk about this, but I also know that Maddie feels quite strongly about how young she was when she started pupillage, and certainly in an area like family law where you're advising people day in, day out about their children being removed, about their mortgages. You know, when I started pupillage in 2018, so I would have been 24, and I look about 12 as well. I look like the child in need. So the fact that I was advising people about these things that I had never experienced was actually something that was very challenging. And in hindsight, I wonder if I would have been better off waiting a couple of years before going to the bar. So those would be my two top tips. Try and look at the bigger picture. If you don't become a barrister, it's not the end of the world. And I think a lot of people lose that perspective. And 2, don't feel like you're running out of time, because you're not.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we all needed to hear that, especially in law school, where it's very much, and for good reasons as well, it's very much career focused. And I think that's such good advice for people who want to take a step back or want to take a break or go travelling. I think that's brilliant advice. Thank you so much. Madeline?
Also, slightly self-serving promo thing. I run a blog called stiffupperlipblog.com, which is all about mental health in the legal profession. So, yeah, read that. If you don't, I'll know.
I was gonna promo that for you. I think it's brilliant for anybody wanting any sort of insight into the barrister world. I read the it was an article about anxiety and pupillage applications and when you're unsuccessful, and I just thought that was brilliant. So anybody check that out. It's called Stiff Upper Lip. Might just pop it in the chat. But yes, Madeline, you're let us know how you felt about entering the bar really early.
This is my thing that I tell to everyone. As Malvika said, we've done a couple of these sessions with aspiring barristers before, and the thing that I always say is that I think I made a mistake in going to the bar so early, because I was at university for 4 years. The extra year was only because I did my year abroad, straight to the BPTC, straight into pupillage. I applied for pupillage. It was when it was still in May, so I applied when the cycle was still May. Now it's January. But it was when I was doing my finals. So I was in my last year of law school and I was applying for pupillage, and I was exactly that person who attached every single decision and weight and achievement I'd ever done to whether or not this chamber said yes to me. And you get the rejections first, right? So you get like 10 rejections first before you get any interviews. And that is such a difficult way to view your whole life, because you've said, I've come to this university, I've done this course, I know what I want to specialize in, I've done the work, I've put in all these hours, I think I've done the most I can, and they're just telling me I'm not good enough on the papers, and they don't know who I am, and this is devastating. And that's how you feel. You feel terrible. It's a horrible thing to have to go through. And I was 21 when that happened to me. I was not resilient. I'd never been through anything. I'd gone from a nice life in Brighton to a nice university in Cambridge. Like, I had a huge amount of privilege, a huge amount of no self-awareness, no idea about what the world was, what jobs were. I'd never had a full-time job. And I was applying to this job that I thought it was one thing, and it turns out is something entirely different. I didn't understand the bar at all when I applied. And I, as I say, I think I made a mistake. I think I was on a conveyor belt because that's what I thought I had to do. And if I was young, then I would prove I was better than everyone else. And if I did it sooner, I'd be better. And that's not the case. I made mistakes early in my career. I made mistakes during pupillage. I make mistakes now because I don't have a grounding in another industry or in any other job. And I found pupillage very, very difficult, extremely difficult, because I was so young and I didn't know what I was doing. And I'd never been in a job, kind of the politics of like a job, when you have like a boss or a mentor and other people around you who are on your same level and all the kind of politics that comes with that. I'd never had that. I'd only ever had summer jobs, and I was doing it in a career that's not very well regulated in terms of bullying, harassment, mental health, anything like that. There's a paper that's just been published today about bullying at the bar, and a lot of it happens when you're in pupillage or a junior barrister, because there's this power dynamic, and you're junior and you are junior until you're not, and that is the way the bar works, and you can't get out of that. You just have to be a barrister for longer. That's the only way you can get past that hierarchy. And I didn't know any of that, and I was 22 and I thought I was great, and I had a terrible time because I didn't understand the world, I didn't understand work, I didn't understand my clients very well, and I just wanted to prove I could do it. And that was the wrong reason to go into the bar, and I wouldn't recommend that any of you do that, because it did not serve me very well. And I had to do a huge amount of growing up. During my pupillage, I was dragged up by two of my supervisors who were fantastic and literally sat me down and said, Maddie, this is not how the world is. You have to realise that. You're not doing anyone any favours by being like this. And you have to learn and you grow. And if I'd had it my way, looking back on it now, I would have waited 5 years. I would have gone and worked for an NGO or worked in politics or worked in something that I wanted to do and understood better than the bar. And then I would have gone back, because as Malvika says, the bar is waiting for you. It is there for you whenever you want to go to it. And the more you do before, the more you bring to the bar. And that's what the bar needs. It doesn't need 22-year-olds out of Cambridge. It needs people that understand the people better and understand the work. And I didn't think that when I was 22. And I think that's something that I would really, really stress, is that it is not a competition. The only person you're competing with is you. You don't need to worry about what everyone else is doing. If you don't want to go to the bar, if you don't feel ready, if you're not sure what you want to do, if you want to do, something else entirely, then do. I was in a similar position as Malvika, again, shock. My third six guy I did a third six with was 33 and had spent 10 years working in prison reform. And he was so interesting to talk to. I used to talk to him for hours about prison reform and youth justice and children in the prison system. And that was stuff that he would always understand way better than me. And he had a much better manner with the children he represented because of that work. And he understood the implications of these things. And I didn't even know about that until I spoke to him. And he, I think, is a better barrister for it. So there are many, many things you can do. Extracurriculars are great. Going abroad is great. University is great. Law degrees are great. You can just do life for a bit and you'll learn more, and that will serve you better at the bar, I think. I mean, look, I'm not trying to preach. I know I sound like I am, but I think it's important that you know what you want and that you go into it for the right reasons. You do it because you want to do the job and you understand the job, not because you're trying to prove a point to someone. That's not the right reason to do anything. So yeah, that's my thing. I think wait a little bit. Yeah, would be my advice.
That is so interesting to hear that perspective as well, because as I say, we're very career focused, so it's so interesting to hear you having got into the bar early and what your experiences of that was. Thank you for that. Zina, how did you manage with confidence and anxiety and the BPTC and applications and everything in law school and going in, even in BPTC life as well, and pupillage?
I think it's weird, actually. I think my confidence issues have arisen whilst being in the profession. And I think, actually, as I was accessing it, I felt pretty sure of myself, which is actually quite weird because it's the other way around. I think I left Warwick on a high because I felt like I'd done well academically, which got me into interviews and whatever else. And same with the bar. Got into pupillage, and I think actually it's only whilst being a tenant and now having been a tenant 5 odd years that you don't realise that confidence isn't just an issue that you need at entry level. You need that and resilience and generally a tough skin if you want to survive in this profession. And I think what an easy mistake to make is to think that actually once you're in, everything's great. It absolutely is not. And I say that because I do a lot of these events, and one thing that really troubles me is if we present too much of a rosy picture of the bar and it's great, everyone can do it, whoever you are, wherever you're from, work hard and you'll get there. I don't really like those narratives. I think they're problematic because it just isn't true. And secondly, I feel like what we need to be talking more about is, we work incredibly hard to get there, but the work doesn't stop there. And I think what needs to be done more at this level is building resilience to understand that, once you get through the door, that's one hurdle. But just to kind of build personal resilience, confidence, to see you through. And I say that because it's weird as barristers, we're confident, we represent people, we go into court, we shout at horrible judges and we tell them about themselves and, we're ready for all of that, don't get me wrong. But often, in my experience anyway, you're navigating a system where you feel like you don't belong. So in my experience, it doesn't matter that I've got the first class law degree, I've got all these awards, I've got a master's, I've got bar school, I've got pupillage and whatever else. There are still and will always be people within the system, the profession, that feel like people like me shouldn't be in there. Now, whether that's because I'm a woman being treated differently, a brown woman, a Muslim woman, and suffering sexism, racism, classism, Islamophobia as a result of all of those aspects of my identity, that's the reality. And so what I want to say to people on here is that great that you want to be a barrister, but don't come to this profession with rose-tinted glasses. Don't think that it's great and everything about it is amazing and then you're going to get here and we're going to change the world. The reason I say that, again, I had this thing, and one of the reasons I came to the bar was I was going through school and stuff in the background of 9/11, and it was that politicization of my faith and my community that radicalized me. Radicalized, not in the ISIS sense, just so we're all safe on here, but in the sense of gave me that real fire to try to want to access a platform that was going to allow me to try and fight for my community. And I thought that the bar was going to be a part of that and the law was going to be a part of that. But what you very quickly realise when you take off kind of those naive rose-tinted glasses is that actually the legal system and the legal profession is just one part of the system that perpetuates those injustices. And 5 to 7 years in, this is a question and a crisis that I struggle with each and every single day of my profession. Mm-hmm. So when people say they love being a barrister, yeah, there are aspects of my job that I really like, but there are aspects of my job that I can't stand, and that I feel that I'm complicit in a system which actually just demonizes and vilifies people. And I get that we need lawyers to defend those communities and those people. But one of the things that I'm struggling with and continue to struggle with is how much impact or change can we make within a deeply unjust system that is designed to be that way. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going off on a tangent, but I guess the conclusion really is confidence. You need it all the way through. You need to be prepared to lose it, to try and build it back up, whether you're 2 years call, a pupil, 7 years call. Don't expect that once you've made it, you've made it. There's no such thing. And I really just wish and hope and would say that people, and similar to what was being said earlier, that we separate our sense of self-worth from these external achievements, because I feel like we all exist on this conveyor belt and made to feel like our success and our self-worth is defined by degrees, classifications, awards, scholarships, pupilages, jobs, titles. And I think we need to find a way of reconditioning ourselves away from that mainstream narrative, because it's those mainstream narratives that are the reason why so many of us are struggling with anxiety and confidence and lack of self-belief. Because if we're not conforming to what other people are telling us makes us successful, we feel like we're shit. But the reality is, why are we fighting so hard to satisfy other people's imposed definitions of success? Mm-hmm. And I say that as somebody that is still very much going through this process. But I hope that within that, there might be something useful for those of you that are coming up through this system.
Yeah, gosh, that was brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much for that and sharing your experiences. One question I did have from somebody on one of the group chats we have is is there any tips that any of you have, or Zeenat, since you've mentioned it, any tips on building up your confidence? Obviously resilience comes through I think unsuccessful applications, and I think you build up through life and, you know, breakups and job rejections and part-time jobs. But is there any way people who are shy in nature can build up their confidence? Do you have any tips for that? Zeenat, I'll come to you because we chat about confidence.
Sorry, I thought we were going around.
Yes.
Building confidence, yeah. I mean, there's all the obvious stuff that we can do to build our confidence in terms of these extracurricular activities that maybe push you outside your comfort zone. I know that a lot of people struggle with public speaking, so sometimes getting yourself in those situations where you're doing stuff like that. But also the less obvious things in terms of just being more comfortable in yourself. I think that starts with getting to know yourself better and being confident in your own skin. And I think that's what we miss. We jump to the mooting and the mock trials and let me try and do all of that. And we can appear incredibly confident in delivering that advocacy, but actually, are you confident as a person? So I think for me, the starting point is the internal work. I don't have all the answers to that because, like I said, I'm still on a journey very much myself. So maybe you guys need to give me confidence tips. But I think it's a self-reflective process, really thinking about, you know, what do you struggle with? What are you better with? How can you grow? What did you do good that day? What could you do better? I know for me, one of the things that I try and do, although not very consistently, is journal. And I think that that's a good way of kind of charting your progress in lots of ways and kind of reflecting and looking back. But confidence is one of those weird ones. Sometimes for me, it could just be, you know, putting on a face of makeup and making myself like look nice, and that might give me confidence for the day. So I guess it's subjective and it's something we've got to find for ourselves. I'm sure the other speakers have got points on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Melvi, could you have any confidence tips?
Yeah, so my friend Emma gave me this idea, but she has a nice things folder on her email account because in this job, because we're self-employed, we don't have managers, we don't get a lot of reassurance that we're doing things right. But every now and then you might get an email or a note from an opponent or a judge or someone in chambers who said, hey, you did really well today, or your submissions were really well drafted. And you have to cling to those because otherwise you have absolutely no idea if you're doing well or not. And you're constantly in your own head thinking, I just had the worst day in court. I honestly think that I feel like I have more bad days in court than I have good days. The reality of it's probably not that bad, but that's how I feel because I think we're conditioned to be so particular in this profession that we're constantly thinking about everything that's gone wrong rather than everything that's gone right. So whenever I get a nice email, I put it in my nice things folder. Whenever I'm feeling particularly low, I just reread it. And I also think find your communities. Like I said, we're in a Asian Women at the Bar WhatsApp. Sorry, Maddie. But it's an opportunity really for us to share experiences that are very much connected to aspects of our identity that not everyone will necessarily be able to relate to. Experiences of racism with clients. Do we feel that people treat us differently as Asian barristers? And it's helpful to have those communities to vent. It's a safe space to feel like, actually, this crisis of confidence I had today might be tied up in something more structural, and I want to be able to share it with other people and see if they've had the same experience. And I find that really comforting. So I think try and find your own community of people who are at the same point in their lives as you, same point in their careers, have the same sorts of backgrounds as you, and then you can really kind of bounce ideas off each other and realize that you're not totally alone, because it can be a very isolating profession, especially since lockdown. I can go weeks and weeks and weeks without seeing anyone. So I need to have that human connection just to know that things are still going okay.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. I love the idea of the group chat as well, Asian Women at the Bar. I think that's a brilliant point on confidence and diversity as well, and how you can...
Yeah, we're obviously plotting world domination one Asian woman at a time, but we're putting it on the DL so that people don't find us out.
That's brilliant, thank you. Madeline, do you have any tips on confidence?
I think the point I would pick up is the one Malvika made about people. I think you have to be willing to open up to people. I think the bar can be a very competitive place, and because you're competing for the same work, right? Like if a case comes in, why would they give it to you over someone else? And that's a horrible culture to work in, because you feel like you can't trust anyone. If you give a case to someone's cover, you might not get it back. All that kind of stuff. So it's not an environment that's designed for camaraderie. And so you need to find people that you trust and that you can talk to and who make you feel better. And that applies at law school as well, because I know how competitive law school can be, and it's exactly the same thing. And I had a friend at university who was the only other one in my year who wanted to be a barrister and knew that's what she wanted. And we got on really, really well. And I'm so thankful that she wasn't hyper competitive and that she wanted to do property law. And I was like, you crack on, that is fine. So we never had a particular competitive edge, and we were able just to share our experiences about letdowns and things we didn't get and things that we felt went badly and bad exam results and all that kind of stuff. So that was really helpful. And I think the broader point that I think Zeenat made is you have to do this job for the right reasons. You have to have a motivation. You have to have something driving you towards it. And I think for me, similarly to Zeenat, although in a much less effective way, I'm politically driven. I want to do this for the right reasons because of my politics and the way that I was raised, and I never wavered on that. That's what I wanted to do, and that's why I wanted to come to the bar, and that helped me a lot, because I would look around at these people I was at law school with who I thought, well, I'm sure you'll be an excellent barrister, but I don't think you really care about this work. And I do. I know that I do. And I care about the outcomes for these people and for these children. Mm-hmm. And that's rare. It sounds mad to say as a family barrister, but you do meet a lot of barristers who don't care about the work. They switch off and they come home. And I'm not saying that you should care about it to a fault where you think about it all the time. That's not what I mean. I just mean that you kind of have to identify what your broader purpose is. Why are you here? What's your aim of the bar? If you just want to take silk or be a judge, and whatever the cost, then you're probably going to have a problem, because you're not there for you, and you're not there for a broader goal that motivates you and inspires you. Because I don't think you can do this job unless you really have a broader motivation to want to do it. And why do you want to be this kind of barrister or that kind of barrister? Why do you take this style in court rather than that style? How are you as an opponent? What do you like to be against? Do you care about making this a better profession and investing into this profession? Because I think you have to, and your confidence has to come from that. I am confident that I care about my job enough that if I'm not always the cleverest person in the room, then that's okay. And you kind of have to, give yourself a bit of a break and just say that if you're here for the right reasons, then you'll be fine. You can find that confidence from what has given you the confidence prior to your decision to come to the bar or decision to go to law school or whatever it might be. And yeah, speak to people. I mean, make friends is super important. You can't do this on your own. As much as they might want you to. The BSB designs it that you should never speak to anyone else ever, but you can get around
that. Thank you so much. And then just quickly, because I know we're running out of time, in terms of diversity, along with being women, obviously we all have different identities and backgrounds and social mobility issues or not social mobility issues, or visible, invisible disabilities, or whatever. Do any of you have any tips on taking up space from a minority background or just being a woman in general? Or have any of you had any bad experiences from being in the minority and not having that straight white male privilege, even though, well, obviously I have a level of privilege as well being a white woman, but do any of you have any tips on taking up space from the background that you come from? Malvika?
Yeah, I think be prepared for people to dismiss your lived experience of structural discrimination. So, I'm very privileged in lots of ways. I'm middle class. I went to a private school. I've experienced privilege in lots of ways. I am also a brown woman, and that has coloured my route into the bar. I've definitely had comments made to me about filling a quota at my chambers, and that's how I got pupillage. Or, the only reason I won that moot was because I was a brown woman. Those sorts of things that are probably said, it's just a joke, it's just banter, but there's always a grain of truth in it, especially if it's coming from a white man. And share those experiences with people. And if you try and say, look, this happened to me, I don't know how to process it. Be prepared for people to say, are you sure you're not just being paranoid? Or are you sure that that's what actually happened? Are you just reading into it a bit too much? My friend Alex's experience has been all over Twitter and the news recently about being mistaken for a defendant several times. And a lot of the reaction, sadly, was, did that actually happen? Isn't that how everyone else would react? Are you sure you're not just reading into it a little bit too much? So you have to be prepared to know your story, know your narrative, and to not feel silly or stupid for having those experiences, and not made to feel that you have to hide them or to feel like you have to completely reconceptualize them to fit someone else's narrative. It's getting better, the bar. It's got a long way to go. And like Zinat said, when I first came to the bar, it was really troubling for me because I felt like I was perpetuating a system that is institutionally sexist, racist, and homophobic. And how do you sort of reconcile those two things? I want to be a part of the system which is perpetuating the very oppression that I want to challenge within the system. So it is, I think, whenever you're at the intersection of any kind of oppression, you will always have this internal battle on a day-to-day basis about, am I making it worse? Is what I'm doing actually contributing to that oppression? And I don't have an easy answer to it. And it's something that I'm probably always going to struggle with. But you just have to be live to the fact that you will struggle with it. And that's okay. And yeah, I'm sorry, there's probably a more articulate way to deal with it. But I think it's difficult for me to answer in kind of 4 minutes how diversity impacts my life on a day-to-day basis when it's my identity. It's how I experience the world around me. So yeah, ignore people when they tell you that the microaggressions that you experience day to day are not real, or that they're not meaningful, because your truth is your truth, and be prepared to put up with a lot of shit in the profession because of where you come from or what you look like. I'm sorry, am I allowed to swear on this? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's too late. I've done it. Maybe someone will bleep me out.
Of course, thank you so much. That was really, really powerful. Yeah, thank you. Zina, Madeline, do either of you have anything to add to that? That was brilliant.
I'll defer to Zina on this.
Thanks, Madeline. I think, this is a topic that I could talk for ages and ages, but I won't. I think I would echo what's been said, but also something that I've grown into is having the confidence and the conviction now to challenge things within chambers or organisations or whatever when certain things are happening. Whereas when I was a pupil or quite junior, I there was a reluctance for obvious reasons. And Madeline mentioned that power dynamic that exists, which is a real thing. As a pupil and a junior tenant, you feel you can't say things for fear of never getting tenancy or whatever. But I think one thing that's happened in my experience, at least, is as I've progressed through, I've realised that I just give less of a fuck. And what that means, though, is that it comes with consequences. And the consequences of that is that often you are isolated. People think that you're probably divisive or making trouble because every time something happens, you're raising an issue. And it may well be that, you know, your clerks don't love you as much or fellow colleagues don't love you as much. But I think one thing that I've had to do, and what others may do, is feel like you've got to make a choice in terms of when things happen that are unacceptable to you. Do we just be like, okay, eye roll, yeah, this is what the bar's like? Or actually, do we need to be moving into a space where people are being actively challenged about the issues that are occurring? One positive thing, I suppose, that you could say on the back of all the stuff that's happened over the summer with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement is that some organisations, chambers, inns, firms are having conversations about race. Often in my experience, I feel like those conversations are made fluffier and more palatable in the context of diversity and inclusion. I have massive issues with that narrative. Again, a webinar for another day. But I guess the golden nugget that I'll leave people with is that you've got to find an avenue that works for you. If that is telling your head of chambers that was absolutely wrong and, you know, what the heck was that, then go you, but be aware of the stuff that comes with. And if actually you're somebody that wants to get on with your job and your everyday reality is your everyday reality, but you don't want to make that noise, that's totally fine too, because that's you doing you. And I just think however we want to deal with those issues, we need to be given the space to deal with it in those ways. Because one thing that I found is that if you are the first person, i.e. you do want to raise issues, people are very quick to shoot you down, as has been said, or, you know, gaslighting's real thing, being made to feel that you're making stuff up, that you're playing the race card or the woman card or the faith card and all of that. And one thing that just troubles me is the fact that, you know, we're supposed to be really smart and intelligent people at the bar, but some of the conversations and comments that are made just, you know, really makes me think, what the heck's going on in the world? But hey ho, on that really positive note, what I would say is, look, for anybody that comes from an underrepresented group or background or minoritized group, we absolutely need you in the profession, because what we need are more people that are going to be willing to live their truths, number one, with courage and conviction, and number two, challenging some of these structures and trying to dismantle them from within, because otherwise it's just going to carry on the way that it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to add that it's really important to go off the back of that to have allies in that sense, because don't leave all the labour to the people who are being oppressed to challenge the oppression. Right after the killing of George Floyd, I remember asking my management committee in Chambers whether we were going to issue a statement on Black Lives Matter. And a black friend of mine said, hey, thanks for doing that, because you saved a black member of Chambers from having to do it themselves. You know, we're not always going to feel comfortable talking about things that directly affect us, precisely for that reason, because we don't want to be seen as playing the race card. And so it's really important that white allies in particular do their bit, because we're not going to be able to do it ourselves, nor do we have the energy or the inclination to do it ourselves.
Yeah, that is such a brilliant point. Thank you so much for that. I think that's such a brilliant place to end, and especially in light of Black History Month, thank you so much for all of your experiences. Yeah, thank you so much for all of the guests coming today. I think that was really interesting in terms of law school and diversity and inclusion. I think that was brilliant. Thank you so much for ending on that note. I'd just like to thank all of you for coming and taking part in our career series. And it's been so interesting hearing all the insights and things you just don't get to hear at other events that focus on different aspects of a legal career. But thank you three so much for coming along to this part of the career series. Oh yes, of course, Zinat runs I'm going to put that on I'm going to copy that and paste it on our Women in Law page. Thank you so much for coming along, and I'm going to end it now, and the recording will be available when my computer decides to upload it. Thank you all so much for coming along.
Thank you so much, Mary.
No worries. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Good luck, everyone. Cheers.